Miri, first of all, I would like to thank you for you have accepted our interview proposal and invitation. Thank you so much.
A real pleasure to be invited. I'm very interested in this audience.
Thank you so much. And I would like also to inform our audience that Israel is online. And Miri Eisen is a retired colonel, is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Herzliya, Israel. Miri has a deep background in the intelligence, security, and diplomacy roles and is a frequent commentator on these issues in world media. During her 20 years in the Israel Defense Forces, she served in a variety of positions, including the intelligence officer of the regional border brigade, the intel officer of the Israeli Airborne Division, and the assistant to the director of military intelligence. Again, thank you so much, Miri. So if you don't mind, I would like to go on to our questions. And the very first question of mine will be associated with what did recently happen in one of your neighboring countries, Syria, and namely, what threats? I would like us to compare the situation that once did dominate in Syria before Bashar al-Assad and the situation that has been formed there in afterwards of his downfall. So the question of mine is, what threats to Israel's security came from Syria during the time of Bashar al-Assad? And what threats might come if Sunni Islamists come to power in Syria? So we want to understand this situation.
I'm going to start by reminding everybody, and perhaps they can open up a map. I'm a map person. Israel has a border with Syria. And it's important to point out that what's happening now in Syria is not happening in a faraway place. Israel has an 89-kilometer border line. It's actually an armistice line. And in 1948, when Israel was created, Syria declared war against Israel. And in that sense, we've had different armistice lines. There was one in 1949, there was a different one in 1967, but we've always shared a common border. So what happens in Syria directly impacts Israel. Syria as a country in the 1950s and 60s, and from the ascendance of the Assad family to be the 54-year dictators over Syria, in all of those years, Syria declared itself as an enemy of Israel. It attacked Israel in 48, it attacked Israel in 67, it attacked Israel in 73. I'm giving that context because in the 70s, when Egypt went to a path of peace, in the 90s, when the Israelis and Palestinians, when Israel and Jordan signed a peace treaty, Syria continued under the Assad family, which is under the Ba'ath party, which is under a minority ruling over a majority, which is under a dictatorship, continued to view Israel as an enemy. And Syria built up its military mainly against what they said is the Israeli enemy, to both attack Israel and destroy Israel. Under Bashar al-Assad, and he was the dictator for 24 years, 2000 to 2024, he inherited his dictatorship from his father, Hafez al-Assad, dictator, leave it for their children. Syria had a closer, stronger, very challenging relationship, both with Hezbollah, a terror army in Lebanon, and with the Islamic regime of Iran, through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, both directly and through that, so that you had here an axis where Syria, which is a big territory that Israel borders, had its own military, that military was both helping out Hezbollah, being helped out by the Islamic regime of Iran, but most of the supplies, most of the weapons actually came from initially the Soviet Union that turned into Russia. So when I talk about the threat under Bashar, it was the weaponry itself that was mainly supplied by Russia, but that relationship both with the terrorist entity Hezbollah in Lebanon, and since the Syrian people, in a variety of ways, it isn't an easy situation, since the Syrian people rose up against the dictator, What Bashar al-Assad did very different from the other dictators is he asked Hezbollah and the Islamic regime of Iran and Russia to come help him. And at that time in 2011, I don't think we understood what that meant. We've only understood it in 2024 because Hezbollah stepped in and the Islamic regime of Iran stepped in and Russia stepped in, and they essentially saved Bashar al-Assad for the last 13 years. And in 2024, when Hezbollah, because of Israel, left Syria to go back to Lebanon, when the Islamic regime of Iran was very much contained by Israel, both in Iran and in Lebanon, when Russia involved in the Russia-Ukraine war, all three of them were not there to help Bashar al-Assad. The Sunni Islamist groups overran Syria in 11 days. And I give that as a contrast because the threat of Bashar al-Assad, Hezbollah, and with Iran was an existential threat for us. And when Hezbollah and Iran were not there, what Israel did in the last 2 weeks was pretty much to attack and destroy no people. All of those weapons that had accumulated in Syria under Bashar, but that's Bashar with Hezbollah and with Iran. So I gave a big overview because the weapons were part of what threatened us. The use of those weapons by Syria that called for our destruction, by Hezbollah that calls for our destruction, by the Islamic regime of Iran that calls for our destruction, us, Israel. And so we destroyed those weapons from falling into the hands of anybody, because the forces now that overran Syria so quickly are not one unified force. It isn't the Syrians. I don't even say, it's probably the common denominator is that they are Syrian, Arabic speaking, and mainly Sunni. But that's the common denominator. There are those that are more secular. There are those that are more, if I can say the term, moderate. There's our Islamist Muslim Brotherhood, jihadists, Al-Qaeda, all the way to Daesh, the Islamic State. And what will Syria look the day after when we talk about that future threat is exactly that question. What will Syria look like the day after? And I don't know yet. I do know that Israel was horrifically wrong before the October 7th Hamas attack, that we are not going to, and I hope for the Syrian people that they have a much better future than they had under Bashar. But we, Israel, cannot sit around and just wait to see what happens if the jihadi Islamists take over. Because if the jihadi Islamists take over and they're part of what's there, that is very bad news for Israel and for the world.
The second question in line will be associated again with the presence of Iran in the story. So how likely is a clash between Jerusalem and Tehran? And especially how likely is Iran to use nuclear weapons against Israel if Tehran acquires weapons of mass destruction?
In the last year, we had 2 occasions in 2024 of a direct, open, violent clash between the Islamic regime of Iran and Israel. I very much always say the Islamic regime and not Iran. Iran is a country of 95 million, both Persian and other speaking people. And there's the regime. And I say the same about Syria under Bashar al-Assad as a dictator. And I give that fine tuning because in the question that you asked, for me, the challenge is the Islamic regime of Iran, that the main arm of that Islamic regime is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. I am not worried about the Iranian military, the Iranian army. They're not what threatens me, Israel, or you, or anywhere else in the world. What threatens Israel directly, both nuclear and in a direct clash, is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Essentially, what the Islamic regime established are 2 separate militaries. The one, you say Iranian army, and it's got the old, like literally the US equipment from the 1970s. And when you say Iranian Revolutionary Guard, you get to cutting edge weaponry that is both developed in Iran, is reversed engineered in Iran using North Korean technology, Russian technology. Iran, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, export weapons to Russia right now. And it's not just UAVs, drones, it's different types. There's a whole aspect. So the possibility, it's not a possibility of a clash. We've already had a direct clash. In it, the Islamic regime with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard used different types of platforms against us. They used intercontinental ballistic missiles that Iran develops and has and makes. They used different other types of missiles and rockets that are not intercontinental, but not exactly short range, but long range ones that aren't that are cruise missiles. They used drones of big variety, and in them all, in those two occasions, we stopped it in the sense that we intercepted it on the way. We were very effective. And when I say very effective, the statistic is that we stopped 99%, which means that 1% got through. No other country in the world can even say anything like this. And so in any additional future confrontation, we did very, very well. Could they do more than what they did in April of 2024, in October of 2024? I don't think so. I don't think that they have capabilities that they were holding back and not using. Add into that part of what Iran, the Islamic regime, were using against us, a big part of, was Hezbollah, both in Lebanon and in Syria, and the other proxies. And the developments of the last few months of Israel going on the offensive very effectively against Hezbollah as a Lebanese force, but also as a proxy of Iran, against the cache of weapons and all of the different diverse weaponry that Iran supplied to them, that the Islamic regime supplied to them. The Islamic regime doesn't have that anymore. Okay, that was one portion of the question. The second portion is on the nuclear issue. After October 7th, believe that the Islamic regime of Iran, if it has nuclear weapons, that they would use nuclear weapons. I believe that. I do not have what's the word that I'm thinking of in Hebrew right now? I can't have the opportunity, that's not the correct word. I can't have the leisure of assuming that they're rational and they wouldn't use it. I think that the Islamic regime of Iran wants to destroy me. I think that if they hold a weapon of mass destruction like a nuclear weapon, that they would use it against me. Would they at the same time destroy the holy city of Al-Quds, Jerusalem? Probably. And so here I say, so what's more important, the holy city of Al-Quds or destroying what they will call the Zionist cancerous regime of the world? And I can't take the leisure to say that they're rational. Just today, and the International Atomic Agency announced that Iran, the Islamic regime, is very close to a nuclear weapon. So for me, it's the one level is that I think they would use a bomb. But the second level is just as important, because when you have a bomb, you are a different stakeholder player in the international community, certainly in the regional. And who do they border? We could talk. I mean, I am assuming people listening to us right now know who you border, know where countries are. When a country has a nuclear bomb, look at North Korea, look at India and Pakistan. They can act differently than countries who do not hold them. And nobody in the world wants the Islamic regime of Iran to be holding a nuclear weapon.
So
yes, I threaten. Sorry, please.
Sorry. So the behavior of the state is changing when that certain state has got nuclear weapon, or other various other types of the weapon of mass destruction. It's becoming more aggressive in its behavior.
I'm going to give the following example. What Russia did in Ukraine is a nuclear power against Ukraine. What you can do in response to Russia against Ukraine, you have to take into account that Russia is a nuclear power. Russia under Putin threatened to use tactical nuclear weapons. You have to take that into account. I'm not saying if I think he would or wouldn't, but when you have nuclear weapons, Your response to a country that has nuclear weapons to the threat of the use of nuclear weapons is different than when they don't have it. It changes all of the rules in the international community. The way that the international community won't touch North Korea, as an example, is because they think they have nuclear weapons. And so you can't just go and do something, because what if they, irrationally for me, use the nuclear weapons? But they have a different rationale. The nuclear weapons have not been used in the world since August of 1945. I think that we have forgotten, don't know, or lost how much it changes the world. In September of 2007, under Bashar al-Assad, Assad was building a nuclear facility that was a North Korean nuclear facility inside northeast Syria. And Israel attacked it in September of 2007. It's like old news 15 years ago. But can you imagine what Syria would have looked like if it had, because it was building a nuclear facility, and Israel at the time attacked it covertly and afterwards declared it overtly. Kind of went under the world's radar. The big question on the table right now is everybody knows that the Islamic regime of Iran aspires to nuclear capability. They say we want peaceful nuclear capability. And I say, really, a country in today's day and age that has oil and gas, why do they need, what they call peaceful nuclear capability? But everybody, the International Atomic Energy Association, they say that Iran is trying to upgrade the uranium enriched and everything. Those are only for a nuclear bomb. That has nothing to do with energy. And Iran is doing that. And the question is, will Israel or somebody else, before they arrive at the state of a bomb, preempt against it? And I leave it as an open question mark. I don't know. I think that the world will be an unsafe world if, I don't want to say when, if Iran gets nuclear weapons.
So that's the very big question, whether all those countries will take preemptive measures or not against Iran acquiring the weapon of mass destruction.
So the changes that have happened now also, and take that into account, what Israel did in the last 2 weeks in Syria was attacking Iranian Hezbollah Syrian sites that include weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, lots of different platforms to use them, missiles, rockets, all the different things that, again, it was the combination of them. Israel at the same time was destroying all of the different air defense systems that were left in Syria, which means that if we choose to do so, we as if have opened a portion of the corridor, it's not the whole way, from Israel to Iran to attack those sites. I'm not saying we'll do so. I do think that part of what we did in the last 2 weeks will give us a better chance, because at the end, you never know what will happen. There are always surprises. It's never easy. But I really do think that the world will be much safer if Iran does not go nuclear.
Dear Mrs. Eisen, it's also well known that there are some certain seemingly or maybe really serious contradictions between official Jerusalem and Ankara. Enough has already been said about the issues on which the positions of the parties diverge. At the same time, from the very beginning of the Syrian crisis, the parties demonstrated a surprising coincidence of their interests based on the demand for the immediate resignation of Bashar al-Assad from the post of president of Syria. Now, let us talk about how likely is it that the security interests of Jerusalem and Ankara coincide, if any at all.
It's a wonderful question. What will happen in the future between Turkey under Erdogan, and I emphasize under Erdogan, and Israel? And in that sense, I should say Israel also with the present government that we have inside Israel. I need to take that into account. So I always look both at the geopolitics and what countries border what countries. We don't border Turkey. I don't think that you border Turkey either. Other countries border Turkey.
I'm so sorry, we have got a very tiny length border, only
you have a common border?
Between 11, 15 kilometers border in one of our regions, autonomous Nakhichevan region.
All right, then I stand corrected, and that makes a difference. When you border a country, as I said, when Israel borders Syria, that makes a difference. We do not border Turkey. Iraq does, Iran does, Syria does. Okay, it's like countries that border, that makes a difference. And I say that in the background because Turkey has different geopolitical interests. Erdogan is AKP, which for me is a version of Muslim Brotherhood. I'm not saying that is a bad or good thing. I'm just saying it is a version of Muslim Brotherhood. And I remind everybody that Hamas is hardcore Muslim Brotherhood. And Erdogan has for all of the years totally backed Hamas. For me, that's really bad. Turkey, overwhelmingly under Erdogan, went through a zigzag when it came to Bashar al-Assad, the Sunnis, the Shiites, and what was going on. But for God's sake, Turkey has an incredibly long border with Syria. What happens in Syria completely directly impacted them. So the fact that Turkey responded in, just like I'm taking steps because I border, they took steps. But the third element is the Kurds. And Turkey, Erdogan, but this is Turkey, not just Erdogan, can I say that they have a complex relationship with their own Kurdish population, with the Kurdish population in Syria, in Iraq, and in Iran, so that you have those four countries, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, that host the Kurds, and that impacts Turkey. Turkey, because of borders, because of geopolitics, and here I'm adding a fourth element perhaps that I take into account on what happens with Israel, is that Turkey, certainly under Erdogan, view themselves as the Ottoman Empire, as something from the past. And I don't say it in a disdainful way. We each have our legacy and our heritage. But there's no question that for Turkey, that Ottoman heritage is both that they're involved directly in the holy places inside the world. And one of them is Jerusalem al-Quds. And so I add that all in. And I say all of those. Turkey, as a Sunni country, it's like 98% Sunni, has managed to have a very geopolitical relationship with the Islamic regime of Iran. They share a border. And I say at the end, you do things, you look who's on your side, who's not on your side. Turkey has had a complex relationship with Russia before the Russia-Ukraine war because of Crimea, because of the Black Sea, because of the Bosphorus Straits. Have I given enough of a geography lesson until now? So when it comes back to Turkey, Israel, Turkey never severed the diplomatic ties with Israel. Israel never severed the diplomatic ties with Turkey. I don't see that happening now, meaning that right now, the fall of the Shiite resistance axes of Hezbollah, Syria, Islamic regime of Iran, Iraq is a different story, changes the entire world and Middle East. It impacts Turkey one way, it impacts us a different way, but suddenly that's in common, okay? We don't back any Islamists inside Syria. Turkey does. But again, I'm saying here, I don't think that Turkey wants to see Al-Qaeda or jihadists or the extreme version of Muslim Brotherhood that's come out. That's going to threaten Turkey. So now we have to see where those different steps go. It's an interesting aspect that I'm really not sure about. The last point I'm going to say is that the other side is that this may be the time where Turkey stands up and says, I'm severing the ties with Israel. If they sever the ties, they're not here. You can't go to the Palestinian Authority. You cannot go, maybe to the Gaza Strip even, without going through Israel. And if they sever the ties, it doesn't make it any easier. So I'm just saying in that sense, for them, it's better to keep the low-level ties. It enables them the access to places that they want to go, certainly to Al-Quds, Jerusalem, at the heart of our land.
It's well known that the organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah that Iran used to back too have been significantly weakened after the Israeli army conducted operations to ensure the security of its own population. How likely is that these organizations will regain their former strength with the support of, let's say, Iran again?
It's a great question that we're all asking right now. I'm not sure that there's a direct answer. We all have opinions, but for everybody, I want to be clear. Opinions are not facts. I'm going to say the following thing. I don't think that Hezbollah knows. I don't think that the Islamic regime of Iran know. They're still reeling from what happened, both from the incredible, I'm very proud of that in that sense, the absolute degrading of the military capability that Hezbollah built up over the last 17 years that Israel has been systematically destroying. It's not all gone, but we've degraded it to the level, and the Islamic regime of Iran, because of what just happened in Syria, cannot resupply them. For me, win-win. We degraded Hezbollah's military capability, and the Islamic regime cannot resupply them. Same goes for Hamas. We have completely degraded their military terror capability, both of them, both Hamas and Hezbollah, as resistance in the Arabic sense of what they talk about, will continue to exist as organizations, as what they're going to call social organizations that are there, but they will they've been turned back from being terror armies to being terror organizations, and the counterterrorism is different. Part of the mistakes that Israel made is that we did not understand the terror army, and we treated Hamas in an incorrect way. And in the months after Hamas's horrific attack, we built up a whole way where we went against Hezbollah in a totally different way. And they're both terror armies. And look at the difference in the way that we treated the one and treated the other. And I say that now we've degraded them both back. I'm not happy about the fact that they're staying as terror organizations, but you can't erase them because the ideology is there. They still call for our annihilation, destruction. They still don't view us as human beings. They still see any civilian inside Israel as being what they're going to call a soldier. And that's what they say, but they attack and target and dehumanize every single person here. And that has not changed. So it's vastly different. Iran has been weakened. They don't have the open line to resupply Hezbollah. And Hamas, all of them, by the way, both Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic regime of Iran, what they've all kept is their media, information warfare, social media capability. They know how to send out messages, and that's going to be, to me, the next arena where we need to take care of that, because they send out disinformation, misinformation, lies. They code it in freedom, liberation terms, and people eat it up. And that's going to be the next battlefield as far as I'm concerned.
So we have already discussed what did happen and what Israel did undertake after 7th of October 2023. And let's talk about what has already been undertaken by Israeli government and military forces after the collapse of Bashar Assad's regime in Syria. So, Mr. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, made two attention-grabbing statements that Israel will forever regain the Golan Heights and that the people of Iran and that country, Iran itself, will be free from the regime there even sooner than Iran believes and the people imagine, even sooner than one can imagine. This is an announcement of a new coming war, or the Israeli intelligence security structures are so strong that they may be able to cause internal Iranian unrest, uprisings, and struggle against the regime inside Iran, which may ultimately be marked by the fall of the regime, as, for example, the Gaddafi regime fell in Libya and the same Assad in Syria. So what could be the scenario, the future scenario for Iran's regime this time?
I'm not the Prime Minister of Israel, and the statements that he makes are both general and policy. When it comes to the Golan Heights, Israel applied Israeli law to the Golan Heights in 1981. We're 43 years later. So when the Prime Minister of Israel says the Golan Heights will stay Israeli, for Israelis, it's been Israel for the last 43 years. I'll stay up front that no country recognizes that, but it's part of who I am. So I'm very aware of the gap in that one there when he says that and everybody's saying, ooh, and I'm going, old news. just like Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel from 1949 and will always be my capital, the Golan Heights, Israel applied the law in 1981. And if afterwards somebody negotiates something else, but that's part of who we are. When it comes to the statements, this is not the first time that the Prime Minister has made a direct conversation to Iranians. Let's be clear. He did it in English. I don't know that all Iranians know English. He's not doing it in Persian. And it's not the only place that he's addressed. He has done something similar to Palestinians, both in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. He has done the same thing to Lebanese when Israel was attacking in that sense against Hezbollah. So I too wish for the Iranian people a different regime than the Islamic regime. You took it a step further, and I say as a development, it said, does that mean that Israel is taking action to change that regime? And I want to hope that we're not the ones that change the regime. I know of zero occasions in the world, zero, where an outside force changed a regime and that it lasted. It hasn't happened anywhere. People inside can change the regime. And I enormously respect both Prime Minister Netanyahu or anybody who wants to try to help the Iranian people change their own regime. As I said, I'm very happy for the Syrian people right now that don't have the horrific dictator Bashar. And I'm happy for the Libyan people that you mentioned who don't have the horrific dictator Gaddafi. But let's be clear, Libya is a failed, horrific, chaotic state ever since. None of us know what's going to happen now in Syria. And if you overthrow the Islamic regime, that I want to have that happen. They're calling for my destruction. It's not that you know what will happen. And only the people there are the ones who are going to be able to define it. So I don't think that we have people on the ground who are right now ready to change a revolution. I do think that the Israeli actions, and perhaps that's more what the Prime Minister is also alluding to, that by destroying the Islamic regime's Iranian Revolutionary Guards hold on the country called Syria through Bashar al-Assad, on the country called Lebanon through Hezbollah, that allows the people in Iran to stand up, look around and say, you know, you've kind of wasted a lot of money on that. Why aren't you investing in our own country? And I want to hear those kind of voices, and I hope that they will bring about a different future. But I don't think that Israel should be directly involved. I don't think that we're actively doing so. And I don't know of any place, as I said, in the world that an outside intervention like that has brought about a real change of regime.
Thank you so much, dear Mrs. Eisen. First of all, thank you so much for your time and this so deep and valuable insights that you have shared with us.
I greatly appreciate the time, and I hope to be able to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much.